Here we do the same thing. We look at the denominators only, and we look at the factors in the denominator and see which factors are missing. So when I look at this denominator here, this has an xy, this has y squared. So here we're missing a y. Okay. On the right hand side, we have 1x, 2y, so here we're missing an x. So the lowest common denominator works out to be x squared, x y squared. Okay. Now if I were actually adding these together, we have to, in fact we are adding these together. I have to make sure I multiply the top and bottom. I need to keep that fraction balanced. Same thing here, I need to multiply the top and bottom. So our new fraction becomes 2y plus 3x in the numerator, and our common denominator is xy squared. These are unlike terms, we cannot group them together. Okay, they just have to stay separate like this as a binomial in the numerator. So again, here when I look at the denominators, I need to figure out what is the lowest common denominator. So I need the lowest common denominator is going to be 18, and here we have two x's, we only have one x here, so we need 18x squared. So I need to multiply this by 2, and x, 2, and x. Here I need to multiply by 3, and times by 3. So our lowest common denominator works out to be 18x squared. And then our new fraction that we with the common denominator is going to be 4ax minus 15. They are unlike terms. I have to keep it as binomial, and that's all over the common denominator of 18x squared. Okay, so we'll do the same process here. Between 4 and 18, the lowest common denominator looks like it's going to be 36. Okay, so our LCD is 36. We have a common A that matches. The B's don't match, so we need 2 B's. We need 3 B's as our lowest common denominator. So then the missing factor here is going to be times 9 times B times B. Here we're missing a factor of times 2, and make sure we balance that fraction with a times 2 on top. So our fraction then becomes 27b minus 14. They are unlike terms again, so we need to keep them as a binomial, and our common denominator is 36ab cubed. Okay, and it looks like I made a mistake here. This is actually b squared, so we end up with 3b squared, or 27b squared. Okay, so our common denominator we need to find by determining the missing factors when we compare one denominator to the other. Okay, so this gets a little bit more challenging. That now we have to accommodate binomial factors. Okay, so we need to factor. So the first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to factor my LCM, my lowest common multiple, my greatest common factor. I factor out of those two terms. Okay, for this one here, I'm going to factor out a common factor of 3x, and I end up with that. Now, when I look at these two factors, what's missing? Okay, well, on this side, I'm missing a times 3 and a times x. So I need to times 3 times x here. On this side, I'm just missing a times 4. So I need to do times 4 times 4. So my lowest common denominator works out to be 12x times x minus 2. Okay, and that x minus 2 represents a factor. Since it's a common factor, we don't need to use that. We don't need to multiply any more of those in, but we need to keep track of that. So our numerator then becomes 9x squared minus 8. Those are unlike terms. And our common denominator is 12x times x minus 2. Leave it in factored form. The numerator doesn't seem to be factorable. Okay, so we're not going to be able to cancel any factors out. So there it is. There's our solution to this. Okay, so this one here, same thing. When you look at the denominators first, remember that this 5 is not a factor, so it's not common with the 15. This x is not a factor, so it's not common with that x. Okay, we have to look at the times pieces. So we have this binomial factor, which matches nothing over here. And we have a factor of 6, which we can match with the 15. So our lowest common denominator here looks like it's going to be 30. So I'm going to times 2 times 2. This side is missing a, so I'm going to do it times 5 here. Times 5. Okay, so the number parts match. This is missing an x plus 5 factor. This is missing a 5 plus x factor as well. And then on this side, this has got a factor of x, which is different than the 5 plus x. So we need to have another factor of x here, another factor of x here. So again, pay careful attention to what we did here. We just worked with the numbers first. I dealt with the binomial factor next, and I dealt with the monomial factor of x last. So our lowest common denominator, I'll just write over here, is going to end up being 30x times 5 plus x. Okay, so we end up with 2a, and I'm going to leave it in factored form for now. If I see that there are some like terms that we can add, maybe I will multiply this out. So we're going to end up with 35ax, and here we end up with 30x times 5 plus x. Okay, so here it does look like we're going to have some like terms, so I'm going to expand this out. So I end up with 10a plus 2ax minus 35ax, and then we have our like terms there. Okay, so our final answer to this is going to be 10a minus 33ax. Okay, that's all over our common denominator. Okay, and again, there is a common factor of a, but there's no factor of a in the denominator, so we're not going to bother factoring that expression, and we'll just leave our answer as such.